What's up and welcome back. Week 14, Setting the Edge podcast show. I am your host with a new Twitter name. It's The Paisano. I'm going to change it to A Paisano. I think that's kind of funnier, but I'm here with my mans, the great Zambino, Ryan Zamichelli. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. Hoping once again to break the slump this week. Seems like any time I roster anybody, it's their cooler week. So let's see how that goes again this week.
Yeah, I mean, my lineup went down the shitter with Colin Kaepernick. So, hey, you live and you learn. I didn't think the weather was going to be that bad. I read some reports and I was like, oh, it's only flurries. And I turn on the game and it's just a complete fucking mess. And I'm like, oh, good Lord, I'm done. 2 points gets taken out of the game for real no reason at all. There was no reason to take him out. It was just bad at that point. But I hit a couple GPPs. I had Flacco Pitta in one that kind of almost broke me even because nobody had him. But other than that, it was kind of a weird week. No Drew Brees for much, like a lot of people. He kind of shit the bed. It was just not a week that I was too happy about at cash games. GPPs were okay. Our four teams in the GPP didn't do as hot as we needed them to, but that's all right. I think we'll take another shot at that again this week potentially. Try to take down a big tournament. I need to hit that this year. I've done it once on DraftKings. I've done it once on Fanduel this year. I want to get another one up, put another deposit towards my college loans. But let's start it off here. Let's start it off with the quarterback position. There's a lot to love, there's a lot of quarterbacks this week, honestly. And I guess if we're going to identify the chalk right off the back, I think it's going to be Russell Wilson at Green Bay. Weather pending, of course. I've seen a lot of love around the industry for some Russell Wilson action. At 7.9 on FanDuel, I think that's a little bit underpriced. But I mean, if Russell Wilson was above 8.3, I don't think anyone would really want to touch him. And I guess Andrew Luck is the other chalky play of the week. Houston and Indy, it was a shootout last time. It's been shootouts in the past. And Andrew Luck has been having a great year this year. I mean, very consistent, but I feel like when you roster Andrew Luck, you expect 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and sometimes he doesn't do that for you. But if I guess I want to identify the 3 top plays for cash games, in my opinion, I'm going to start with Phillip Rivers on the road against Carolina. We know how bad that secondary is. We've seen Phillip Rivers be pretty consistent all year, hitting his ceiling around 28 points and his floor around 12. And, that's okay, but I think this is a homecoming game for him. He played at NC State in college. I don't know how many times in his career he's gone to play at Carolina, but I really like this spot for him. One thing to keep an eye out for would be Tyrell Williams' torn labrum. He did play 98% of the snaps last week, but only saw 4 balls. So that's something to keep an eye on. Another one of my favorite quarterbacks this week, I'm looking at Matt Stafford, 8.5, home hosting the Chicago Bears. I don't think I need to explain myself picking against the Chicago Bears. And I think a lot of people aren't going to be on Stafford. I'm looking around the industry, and people are overlooking him, and I don't really understand that. The Lions are hot. We saw them torch, in the Superdome last week. Stafford has been pretty much around 14 to 15 points per game on FanDuel, and he's gone through a stretch of a crap ton of bad defenses. And when he sees good defenses, and when he sees a bad defense, he torches them for over 18 points, which is what I like in my cash games. And then one other guy that I really like, if I'm going to pay down a bit, I like Tyrod Taylor, home hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh Steelers defense isn't that great. We're seeing a nice floor added to Tyrod Taylor's total. He's pretty much running the ball over 30 yards every time, and we've seen him get 5 rushing touchdowns in the last 6 games. He hasn't passed the ball much, but you get more points for a rushing touchdown. It'd be great if he can throw over 220 yards for once, but I like the floor that he kind of brings to the table. So those are the 3 guys I'm identifying for my cash games. Ryan, what are your top 3 or top 4 favorite cash game plays at the quarterback position?
All right, so I think another guy who's going to be a pretty chalky play that is worth mentioning is Andrew Luck against Houston. People just love that matchup. They love what Andrew Luck pretty much offers as a floor. His worst game since the beginning of October is a 15-point outing. So that's a good floor to get out of your quarterback. Not sure if you mentioned him. I think that he has some merit. I like I like one of the wide receivers on that team a little bit more than I like Andrew Luck. I'll probably be running I probably won't be running them together just in case this game doesn't reach like the scoring potential. That way it doesn't crush my entire lineup. Little thing about the like Stafford being overlooked, I think that it's because the Bears are like a sneakily good defense. Looking at just the FanDuel game logs, it has them ranked as the 7th best team against the pass. And then a couple follows on Twitter of just like NFL stat nerds who like have their own like ranking criteria and systems. They eat 2 guys I'm looking at specifically, 4for4 Josh. His name's Josh Moore. He's got 20,000 followers, has him ranked 3rd in AFPA against quarterbacks. And then Josh, Fantasy ADHD, has him 7th, has the Bears 7th against quarterbacks. So they've been like, and Jim Bob Cooter came out earlier this week and said that the Bears consistently have done a good job frustrating quarterbacks against them. So I think that's why a lot of people are fading Stafford. He definitely will be an under-owned option in cash play. And I think there is definitely merit at home for this hot football team in a game where they should be up and they can't necessarily run the ball all too well. There's definitely a lot of merit there. One guy I like a lot as well is Cam Newton at home against San Diego. The reason for this, I've been looking at home and road splits a lot recently, and San Diego points a lot on the road. They're allowing 27.3 points per game on the road. And when you look at Carolina, like if they're going to score points, it just seems like Cam Newton has to be involved in some way. He's had a really up and down season thus far. He's had like his last 4 games are 24.8, 12, 21, and 12.5. So he's an inconsistent option this year. But when you're able to get him in a good matchup at home, with the exception of the New Orleans game, he seems like he's been a pretty good option, and he's up in that upper 7s range. I think I might so you can fade the chalk a little bit. And then with Russell Wilson and having those weather issues in Green Bay, if you go Cam instead of Russell Wilson, I think you could have an edge on a lot of people in a large 50-50 or even in a little bit of tournament, because I think Russell Wilson will get some decent ownership there as well. One more guy I want to mention is Tyrod Taylor at home against Pittsburgh. The guy just has a solid rushing floor, it seems, and at home, Buffalo's scoring 32.4 points per game. Looking at his home stat or game logs, he has at home this season, he has 25.38, 17.36, 20, 18, and 20. So like he's putting up starting quarterback 1 numbers if you're playing in a season-long league, and those are also startable DFS numbers. So I think those are my main cash options I'm looking to. And then one last guy who I'm thinking might be under-owned, and we both went with that quarterback punt system a couple years ago, and it was pretty good to us. I think Bryce Petty's going to be really, really under-owned. Only a GPP play because this San Francisco defense isn't good. They're on the road, so that's not going to bode well for Bryce Petty necessarily. But if he's able to throw for 2 touchdowns, then he's going to hit a decent value for you, and he's going to allow you to pay up other places.
Yeah, I like that pick too. Yeah, we usually liked punting quarterbacks 2 years ago. It really paid off for us, and at 6.1, it just allows you to do so much, especially with positions where you want to pay up at, which is like the running back and wide receiver spots, and maybe even tight end for like a guy like Eifert, which we'll get to a little later. Some of the other plays I do not mind this week. I don't hate Rodgers at all. He's always a fine play naked. Yes, it is the Seahawks defense, but I think Rodgers is a man on a mission right now. Green Bay can't afford to lose, and if they're going to try to win, if they're going to get to the playoffs and be a legitimate team moving forward, it's all up to Rodgers. So I also don't hate Kaepernick. Everyone's going to be afraid of him. Everyone saw that stinker last week, all you game live watchers, but they're playing the New York fucking Jets. They stink. The Jets are so bad against the pass. And, Kaepernick brings that floor. It's not going to be crappy weather. They're going to be in San Fran. It's a GPP-only play. There's no more Colin Kaepernick and cash for the time being. But I don't hate that play. Jets defense, bad, not good. I don't need to explain myself. And then Kirk Cousins. As you're a Philly guy, and Philly's defense is significantly better, and they're a significantly better team at home all around. But Kirk Cousins, home versus road splits, it's weird. He's better on the road. And a 7.6 at a guy for a 7.6K on FanDuel for a guy that throws for upwards around. He's thrown for over 450 yards twice this year. He's reached 300 times. about 300 yards a bunch of times this year. And if you're a game log watcher, like his worst game in the last like 10 weeks has been, a 13-pointer at Baltimore, and then beginning of the season, 11-pointer at Pittsburgh. But other than that, it's 17, 30, 27, 18, 25, 21, 18. He's been very solid this year, and I guess you got to keep an eye out for Jordan Reed's injury report, and if he plays or does not play with that whatever's going on with his AC joint. But I don't hate that play. And lastly, I'll leave us on this. Eli Manning is 7.7. I'm gonna have an Eli Manning lineup. I'm gonna do it to myself. I'm gonna do a little stack of this game. I'm not proud of it, but I don't know, man. It's just one of those like gut feelings, like, oh, this might be an Eli week, but it might not be an OBJ week. But any other quarterbacks you want to touch on before we move on to the running back position?
Jameis Winston against New Orleans. That's pretty much the last guy. I just want to make sure that I'm on the record saying his name on this podcast, just in case he goes off for 30 points. Yeah,
that's another, I guess, one of the chalk plays, but his ceiling isn't that high and his floor is pretty solid. I mean, he's consistently 13 to like 19 points each game. It is an in division game, so those games tend to be a little bit worse, but they haven't even played this year yet, have they? No, they haven't. Okay, so usually the second time around in division opponents, it gets worse, but I mean, we've seen the Saints defense get torched. Tampa Bay is hot. In my opinion, I might not play a lot of Jameis Winston just because I think Tampa Bay is riding a little too hot right now, in my opinion. But we'll see what happens. But it's worth mentioning because he's right in there with Big Ben, Luck, Winston, Rodgers, that price range. And I like other guys, but I would be doing myself a disservice without mentioning what Jameis Winston can do for you at home, of course, and with a run game that's a little suspect and banged up. But let's move on to the running back position. Highlighted by, of course, David Johnson, DJ, and Le'Veon Bell. Obvious play. Like, I don't think we need to really explain ourselves on why, if you can, play these guys in your lineup. Their floor is literally like 15 points. David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell are pretty much a wide receiver. I saw stats since Le'Veon Bell came back from suspension. He has as many catches, I believe, as Antonio Brown. That's bananas. And David Johnson is Carson Palmer's number one weapon, and Carson Palmer is a shell of himself and can't get the ball down the field. If you're a game log watcher, 34, 24, 31, 24, 14, 21, 33, 32. I think you're doing a disservice if you're doing like a complete fade of this guy. And if you can get both of these guys in your lineup, I think that's optimal. If you can find value at wide receiver and value at tight end. The other running back that I really like this week, that's in my upper echelon of plays, is Thomas Rawls at 6.5K. If he did, besides that week, he got burned us against Tampa Bay, which everyone got burned on that game. If you played Russell Wilson, Thomas Rawls, Baldwin, he burned you. And we saw what he did against Carolina: 15 carries, 106 yards, 2 TDs. And we've seen him be he's pretty much the only guy that's going to get the ball in that offense. And especially if the weather is shitty in Green Bay, it only bodes well for Thomas Rawls because I don't think Russell Wilson's going to be throwing the ball as much. If you want to pay down a running back, I think one of the top plays you can do that with is Thomas Rawls. And like I said, it frees up some value. If you want to get DJ or Le'Veon Bell in, and then maybe a top end wide receiver or a top end quarterback. But those are the three primary guys I'm looking at. What are your top plays at cash game before we get into our secondary plays?
All right, so then there's a token, the top two. I think Zeke's going to go under-owned in this game because if you look at his season, his worst game was against New York early in the year. Well, yeah, it was against New York early in the year. Yeah, game one. So, that's a rookie breaking into the NFL. He's consistently gotten better since that point. He's not quite doing his 25 carries for 130 plus anymore as he did for a 3-week stretch in the middle of the year or in the beginning of the year. But he's still such a solid play. He's got that 15-point floor because he's getting the ball 25 times a game, whether it's through handoffs or through the air. So he's got really high floor play. And then one guy who I really have my eye on this week, Mark Ingram did not practice today on Thursday. So me seeing that, that's with a toe and knee injury.
That would have been great for us last week. Oh, yeah.
Those are two things that you don't want if you have a running back. So if Mark Ingram ends up not playing, I think Tim Hightower is locked into all of my lineups. He's down there with he's down there. I think 600 cheaper than Thomas Rawls is on Fanduel. So getting 5.9 for a starting running back against Tampa Bay. I've seen a lot of love for him like around the industry on Twitter. Got like some guys who run their own projection systems, all that type of stuff, saying that New Orleans has the highest floor for a running back situation, even if they don't score any touchdowns on the ground this week. So me seeing that, and then me seeing that Mark Ingram might be out, that really, really, really makes me like Tim Hightower. If you look at the snap count from last week, you see that Tavares Cadet led the team in snaps, and that's because he's the receiving back in that backfield. So naturally, when you're losing the entire game, you're going to try to get your receiving back who can do things for you through the air when you're just inherently not going to be able to run the ball. So I think that Tim Hightower is definitely a guy who I'm going to be having my eye on, praying that Mark Ingram isn't good to go this week. I was kind of tempted to look at Jeremy Hill. I think he's more of a GPP play this week because even without Giovanni Bernard, they're still finding a way to only get him 57 to 60% of the snaps every week. I was expecting more from him last week. He went 23 for 33 in a score. He still got 11 points, but wasn't a very efficient day for him. Rex Burkhead definitely is the receiving back in that backfield as well. So I'm not really as high on him in cash this week as I was last week. And the top three priced guys from DJ, Bell, Zeke, down, then Matt Forte against San Francisco. You just can't really ignore running back against San Francisco. You got to consider him. I mean, you would think that they're going to have to do something. They're not just going to record 30 total yards on the game. I mean,
yeah.
If Bryce Petty doesn't do anything, then I don't know even, because logic would say you could stack the box in this situation if you're San Fran, but then it's been shown throughout the year that San Francisco's idea of stacking the box isn't stacking the box with 4 down linemen, 3 linebackers, and then a safety or 2 roaming in the box. Mm-hmm. It's putting 8 guys all on the line of scrimmage. So if you get through that first level, then you're gaining 9 yards. It's just a really weird concept that they use as a defense. And then also another value play, if you really want to set yourself apart in a GPP, you could go with 2 value running backs. If Mark Ingram's out, you can go Hightower and Rob Kelly. Yep. I don't really know what to make of Philadelphia right now. I mean, at home, they're allowing 13 points per game. They're allowing 26 on the road, but then their last 3, they're allowing 28 points per game total. So it's what's really going on here? It's tough to decipher and determine what's really going to happen. So I think that he's a GPP play only. I think those are probably all the guys I'm going to consider when I'm building a cash lineup, unless there's any more injury news throughout the week.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I guess my second tier players, as you mentioned, Zeke, you're saving some value here, and he's as good or better, quote unquote, runner than Bell and Johnson is. It's just kind of the in-divisional matchup kind of thing. But if he gets a touchdown, he gets 90 yards, 4 catches, 30 yards, boom, you're freaking solid. Gurley, Forte, as you mentioned, Todd Gurley. Oh man, this freaking guy. If any matchup he's going to do anything, and it's got to be this week, right? Got the Falcons coming in, they're home. They're not really doing much over in the air. It's just you can't play him in cash, but I'm going to have some shares of this guy. It's not like Atlanta has been great against running backs whatsoever. It's just it's a tough swallow to play him. Whether I guess Atlanta's giving up 0.3 yards per rushing yards per carry. They're giving up 3 yards, 4 yards per carry, just about. What are they giving up on the year total? The running backs, 25 points, fantasy points to running backs per game, just about. I like Crowell because I'm a big believer, as our guy Eric Rasmussen said, that the Browns might win this week. And if the weather's shitty, I think Isaiah Crowell is in for a big game. If you take a look at what happened earlier this season against Cincinnati, he had 12 carries, 63 yards, a touchdown. He caught 3 balls, 16 yards. He got you 15 points. He's one of their best options, really. I mean, and if it's crappy weather, I think they're just going to feed him the ball all the time. You had mentioned Fat Rob Kelly. I like him in a tournament potentially, especially if the game flow goes the way I'm potentially predicting it. Philly not being able to move the ball, Washington getting up, and they just feed Fat Rob the ball 20, 25 times. And lastly, I guess I'll finish on these two players. Frank Gore, I really don't hate, value saver. You know, you can play him in cash games just because he doesn't have that great of a ceiling, but his floor is it's like he'll get you 8 points. It might not be it might be the ugliest 8 points you got, but he's going to get the ball between 12 to 20 times, get you between 50 and 90, maybe 100 yards, and you probably get a touchdown. I mean, I don't hate Frank Gore. It's not a pretty play. But lastly, I'm going to end on this. DeMarco Murray at 7.9, going against Denver. Yes, I know you don't really win a lot of money playing guys against Denver, but they're most susceptible to the running back and over the middle, which is Laney Walker and DeMarco Murray. And I think that's what they're going to have to rely on all game, because I don't see Marcus Mariota trying to win this game in the air, to be honest, like on sideline to sideline here. I think DeMarco Murray's going to have to get the ball 20 times in order for Titans to be remotely in this game. And it even bodes well for them if Simeon doesn't play, just because the offense won't be doing as much. So I like DeMarco Murray in a tournament. You're not going to get him high owned. He's going to be right where you want him. And if he gets you, 100 yards, a touchdown, 4 or 5 catches, 30 yards, boom. I mean, that's smashing value right there. Are there any other running backs that we missed that? I guess you could say Lamar Miller. I don't know. The Colts aren't great against the run game, but damn, that Houston offense is just so bad. And Lamar Miller in the second half of the season isn't good. He hasn't been really that good. So buyer beware. I mean, he did have 31 points against them earlier this year. So, I mean, why wouldn't he have another good game against Indianapolis? But, it is the second time they're seeing him, and I figured they're going to game plan for Lamar Miller. But a 7.2K, it's not breaking the bank for you. And he's pretty much the best offensive weapon on that team. So it's something to consider. Anything else from the running backs, or are you all set?
We're all set. I think we mentioned pretty much everybody who could be startable on any winning team.
Gotcha. All right, let's move to the wide receiver position here. Highlighted by, of course, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, OBJ. Out of those three, I mean, Mike Evans has the most superior matchup on the board. I mean, he's a 91.8 grade on Pro Football Focus. He's got the highest advantage I think I've seen this year, according to our Pro Football Focus, wide receiver cornerback matchup. And he's going to be seeing probably Delvin Breaux a lot of the game, and he is not that great of a cornerback. But what was that stat you were mentioning before with Mike Evans' career against New Orleans? Because that's very interesting.
He averages 3.5 targets per game career against New Orleans.
What the hell, man? I'm going to be no Evans in cash for me. I'm not doing it.
3.5 targets, and then this season he has a 55% catch rate. So let's say he gets 4 targets. He's getting 2 catches. So, I think this might be a situation to fade the chalk, and hopefully it pays off.
Yeah, I'm going to fade the crap out of the chalk here because, I mean, if you heard what I'm doing before, I'm going to play David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell. I'm not going to have the value to really go like a Mike Evans or an Antonio Brown unless I'm really digging deep into some crappy wide receivers and, a real cheap quarterback. But Mike Evans is the highlight, and I'm not going to play him. Maybe it bites us in the ass. Hopefully not. I'm going to fade the chalk on this one. I'd rather go to Antonio Brown. I mean, he's got another great matchup against Stephon Gilmore, slot receiver. He plays on the right side of the field, and Antonio Brown's on that side of the field about half the time. So he's got the advantage there. I'm not going to be playing any OBJ. Do not like OBJ this week. It's like a running joke in the industry that OBJ, only gets slants for 5 yards, and if he somehow breaks a tackle, he's gone. And that's really it. That's really all we've seen from him this year. I don't think I'm going to be playing OBJ in cash. And with Julio Jones having a turf toe, I'm out. I mean, he has this injury in the past, and then he goes off and lights it up. I'm okay with not playing him in cash. Going down the chart, not really that interested in Dez Bryant that much, but I am very interested in T.Y. Hilton, and you were mentioning that before. You might not play Luck, but you're going to have someone on that team, and I think T.Y. Hilton is the play at 7.6. Hosting Houston in the Dome. He's been the man the last couple weeks. We've seen Moncrief become just a red zone target, sort of. He's not getting the ball between the 20s, and we saw T.Y. Hilton just light it up against New York. We've seen him light it up against Tennessee. He had 171 yards against Chicago. 171 against San Diego. Sure, he's been a little bit inconsistent with how many receptions he gets, but I think this is as good as it gets for a matchup for T.Y. Hilton here. And he has a great, like I said, he's got a great matchup against Charles James, who's pretty much in the slot 92% of the time, and T.Y. Hilton is in the slot about 60% of the time. And he's going to own that matchup. So I love me some T.Y. Hilton. If I can get up to him in cash, I think I will. Let's move on to the mid-tier, guys. Who do you like in the mid-tier here? I guess under 7,000.
All right, under 7,000 on FanDuel. I think you just got to bring up like guys like Tyrell Williams. You can be worried about his like range of motion and everything. He scored a touchdown last week. He didn't look bad. And then he has a good matchup coming up. He only had 4 targets, though, so that's a little worrying. Playing injured for pretty much the foreseeable future. It's buyer beware. He could be a tournament play if you want to run a Rivers Tyrell Williams stack. I think that there's a lot of merit to that. One guy who I want to say also be careful about is Michael Thomas, showing up on the injury report with like a mysterious foot injury. He didn't practice on Thursday. Same with Marka Ingram. So I think that there's value opening up on that New Orleans offenses. New Orleans probably isn't going to win very many 17-14 games this season. They're going to have to win their games like 27-25 with some of those big outputs and everything like that. So I think that if Michael Thomas ends up not playing, you can look at somebody like Brandon Cooks or a Willie Snead as somebody who's very viable in either a cash or a GPP setting. Cash, it's a little bit trickier because you're not sure. Like, you really just got to pick one and pray that you picked the right one. GPP, you can kind of afford a little bit more that risk-reward factor that would be there with that situation opening up. Golden Tate is a guy who could, like, depending on the situations that unfold around him, could see a very big jump in my rankings because if you look at the offense, the injury report, they got Theo Riddick questionable with a wrist. They got Marvin Jones questionable with a quadricep injury, and then Eric Ebron questionable with a knee injury. So those are 3 very big parts of that passing game who all are questionable right now. It looks like most of them have participated in practice in limited forms thus far this week. But like come Saturday night, Sunday morning, if anything unfolds with any of them, I think Golden Tate could be rising up my boards a lot. And then I'll pick one more play. Tyler Boyd is another play who I've mentioned him probably every single week since AJ Green went down. And I'm going to bring him back up again because you got injury situations around him. You got James Wright, the other wide receiver, the third wide receiver on that team that they pretty much have active right now. He's injured, and I don't think he's looking like he's going to play. And then Brandon LaFell is now questionable with a knee injury for this week against Cleveland. He practiced fully on Thursday, though, so that is kind of reassuring for like the Bengals' sake, not really for fantasy's sake. I liked LaFell a lot last week. He's been seeing targets 9, 9, and 7 in his last 3 weeks. This Cleveland matchup's a tricky one because earlier in the season, I believe this was the matchup that saw the AJ Green Hail Mary that hit the chalk and pissed off everybody who faded the chalk. And it just like it wasn't a smart situation to play for GPP, but then because of that one lone play, it ended up paying off for GPP because like the game flow in that game earlier in the year didn't say go take the Bengals in a game against the Browns. It was they're going to overpower the Browns. They're not going to throw the ball in the second half. Don't touch them. But then that play hit the chalk. This game, as you mentioned, and then in our chat with Raz, this game could be close. I mean, Vegas had it this morning at 5.5 in favor of the Bengals. RG3 is coming back. I mean, there's just a lot of unknowns in this situation. Like, I'm not saying RG3 coming back is a good thing. I'm saying RG3 coming back is an unknown.
Yeah.
It's something that we haven't seen for the past, whatever it's been, 8 weeks. We've seen Cody Kessler, we've seen Josh McCown for the past 8 weeks. We know that when they're out there, they don't have that shot to come out and shock somebody. We haven't seen RG3 for the past 8 weeks. We don't know what's going on in that locker room with RG3. Maybe he comes out and injects something into that offense. And then if that is the case, you could look at the Bengals passing game for some GPP options. And then Tyler Boyd has an interesting floor. I'll say that. When we were discussing him against whoever they faced 2 weeks ago, I can't remember for the life of me. Baltimore, yeah. We were talking about where his floor is at, and
We pretty much nailed it.
Yeah, I'd say it was pretty much like a Tyreek Hill floor where it was like his 5 receptions for 62 yards, like which is what he ended up getting that week. Last week he ended with 4 for 66. So the last 2 weeks he's at 8.7 and 8.6. There's nothing special there, but I do think that there's the possibility that like those are two okay defenses. Baltimore is one of the best defenses in the league. Philly on the road's not a very good defense, but they still have the talent, I think, to kind of stifle some players. Cleveland doesn't have that talent. So I think Tyler Boyd could have a 14-point game in him this week, where he may be like the highest risk player on like a FanDuel cash lineup if I build one.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that totally. I guess in that same range of players that I'm kind of looking at, speaking of Cleveland and Cincinnati, I like Terrell Pryor a lot. Now, if the weather is really crappy, I think you can just throw out everything we just said about that game because I don't want to touch crappy weather again, especially in cash. But Terrell Pryor is one of the best talent, honestly, like quote-unquote talents in the NFL.
Yeah, raw talent.
Yeah, raw talent in the NFL. And this dude was a quarterback. And you take a look at his game log, he's balling out, right? And now you got, their quote-unquote starting quarterback back, and the guy is seeing 22 targets last 2 weeks, albeit he's only maybe catching about half of them. But, he's getting a shit ton of yards, man. In his best games, he's getting a lot of yards. When they played Cincinnati last time, it was not a good game. I think something happened that game. I forget what it was, but I like Terrell Pryor this week because we're big fans of the Brownies this week. I think that they could pull off this upset. Another guy in that range, I like Jamison Crowder. I think Jamison Crowder has a really good matchup, and especially if Jordan Reed doesn't play. Jamison Crowder has been this year's quote-unquote Eric Decker because if you take a look at what he's done this year, he's either gotten 70 yards or a touchdown in every game. And that was Eric Decker last year, and he was pretty much the cash game god for the most part. You just stuck him in your lineup, and then you built around everything else. Let's look down here. I like Shawn Jackson in the GPP. Whenever that dude comes back to Philly, I think it's narrative street. And then there's been reports that he wants to come back or he was intrigued about coming back. I like that in the GPP if I'm going to do a little stack. If Julio Jones is significantly hurt, and Mo Sanu's got this groin thing, Taylor Gabriel, worth a look. I like Corey Coleman, same deal with Pryor. I like Dontrell Inman more than the Tyrell Gazelle, in my opinion. I think Inman is the deep ball guys. Carolina's susceptible to that, and he's been pretty consistent over the last couple weeks. He's catching pretty much. Last week I'll be 2 catches on 5 targets, 50 yards and a touchdown. But he's a good deep ball threat. If Tyrell doesn't have that range of motion like he did last week, I think he's worth a look. Going down here, Sona is vastly underpriced, and I can understand why, especially if the circumstances continue to what like they did last week for the Broncos. Emmanuel Sanders at 5.9 really doesn't make any sense to me, except the fact that FanDuel believes that Trevor Siemian isn't going to play, and that they're not going to be able to move the ball through the air. In Emmanuel Sanders' best games, he gets that touchdown. He pretty much sees 8 to 10 targets every game. He's been, I think, a little bit better than Demaryius this year. But if Siemian is not playing, then I don't want any part of Sanders. But at 5.9, you're getting a talent that's quote-unquote talent that's like 7.5 or higher. I'll mention Jordy Nelson too. Jordy Nelson at 7.1. Solid play. As we were mentioning before, last time the Packers had played the Seahawks, they threw Devontae Adams onto Richard Sherman's side of the field, and then it's completely called to the wash on that side. And Jordy Nelson had a decent game. So I think there's merit to that. I think Pierre Garçon has a great matchup against Philly. As you can see, I'm targeting Philly here, but could be wrong. Another sneaky play, I think Kenny Stills is a really good matchup. I was looking at the advantage here. He is a top 10 advantage on our Pro Football Focus sheet against, cornerback Marcus Cooper from Arizona, who's a 40.9 defender against the pass. That's absolutely shit. And not that Kenny Stills is going to wow anyone, but if you look at his Pro Football Focus grade, it's about a 70. It's not bad. It's got a good advantage. I think there's merit to that play. You had mentioned Willie Snead, and once again, Willie Snead has a great matchup in the slot. Didn't happen last week, unfortunately. But Vernon Hargreaves, the third, is not a good cornerback at all. And I think Willie Snead, if Michael Thomas's injury, is still hampering him, I think I don't know if I'd play him in cash or not. I'm a little worried with the volatility of the play, but I don't hate it. I guess it's worth mentioning. Whatever healthy Bears receiver is available, you can play him in a GPP for a cash saver. Am I going to do it? Probably not, because they're all crappy receivers. I'm looking at my sheet here. Yeah, I mentioned Pierre Garçon. He's got one of the best matchup advantages against Micah Hyde. Ted Ginn. Ted Ginn is going to – I'm going to call it now. Ted Ginn is catching another 40-yard bomb. I'm calling it here. He's got a great matchup against Craig Mager, who's not that great of a slot cornerback. Even though Ted Ginn is lines up in the slot, and he's quote unquote matched up. Oh, excuse me, he's not in the slot. He's on the right side of the field majority of the time. Craig Mager is expected to be behind him a decent amount. It's weird what San Diego does with the cornerback position since they're a little hampered, but they have shown improvement. But I think Ted Ginn is going to burn him. I think that he's going to catch another 40-yard plus touchdown pass. Put that in the books. That'll be my bold call. Is there any other cornerbacks or wide receivers that I missed here that I want to touch on? You said Tate. I like Tate. Thomas News, that kind of sucks. I'm going to be off of Inman. If the Rams win this game, I think Kenny Britt is going to have another 100 yards and a touchdown. So that'll be another one of my bold calls. If win, then Britt has a great game. But I think that's it. Do you have anyone else you want to discuss for wide receivers?
Just going back to Terrell Pryor, you were talking about the last time they played Cincinnati. He pulled his hamstring the week before that, so he's playing. He was playing injured in that matchup. And then, if you're going to say that RG3 can do anything well, it's throw the ball downfield. And Terrell Pryor is just a physical specimen who I think can stretch the field really well. Mm-hmm. So he might be finding his way into my cash and then some GPP lineups this week. I'm not going to say that's out of the question. I think we can move on to tight end now.
All right, cool. Tight end position, highlighted by questionable Jordan Reed, who may or may not be playing with that, AC joint in his shoulder. He apparently felt a lot of pain today, so that's not very good, and I really hope he doesn't play, especially in my season-long league because I'm going against him in the first round of the playoffs. But the two guys that are highlighting at the top, Tyler Eifert in a great matchup against Cleveland. Cleveland's been torched by tight ends all year long. If you have the value, put him in your lineup. I think that's a solid play. And then Jimmy Graham at Green Bay. Green Bay's not very good defending over the middle. I think he's got a great matchup there. I'm not really that interested in Greg Olson. I think whenever I play him, he doesn't do good, man. I don't know. I'm not really that into Greg Olson this week. What are your thoughts on him?
I'm not going to close him out of my research when I'm looking throughout who I want to play.
Yeah.
But he certainly isn't. He's consistently hovering around 6 points a game right now. He's getting the targets. He's probably one of the highest volume tight ends. He had a couple weeks stretch early in the season where he had 10, 13, 13. And those were the weeks where he went 9, 18, 22. But since then, he's been seeing his 7 targets a game, catching 4 of them and getting 35 yards, 40 yards. So he just hasn't been a ceiling play where if he's on your roster, then you're probably going to have a guy who's low priced hitting a really good value elsewhere in order to cash. So I'm not as high on Greg Olson this week. Some guys that I am on, there's the token Tyler Eifert being the best option through the air for Cincinnati. Jimmy Graham just being being involved in that offense now at this point is really reassuring. He's seeing the targets. He's seeing the red zone targets. And he's getting a decent yardage when he doesn't get in the end zone. I'm not really high on Delaney Walker this week. Denver does a really good job. They aren't as good defending the run this week, but I think they can still lock up a tight end if they need to. They know that if you lock up Delaney Walker, then you're probably locking up that passing game. A guy who I'm looking at that I'm not sure a lot of people are looking at is Cameron Brate. Jameis Winston, when he's getting blitzed, has thrown to Cameron Brate 16 times. And he's completed 13 of those passes this season. And the Saints blitz more than anybody else in the league. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm looking.
Yeah, I like Cameron Brate a lot. I'm not very fond of his price, though. But you know whose price I'm not really fond of? Ladarius Green and Zach Ertz. What the hell makes Ladarius Green going to be a $5,800 player on Fanduel? I don't care that he saw 11 targets last week. I don't give a crap about that. I don't think I'm avoiding. That's the chalk of the chalk. I think at tight end is Ladarius Green, especially on DraftKings. And people were like, "Oh, he's 3.9. No, he's only 5.8." fuck that. I'm off Ladarius Green, man. I don't know. Big Ben on the road, Darius Green just only being out there for, when he's on the field, they're throwing the ball. That's it. So I don't think it's very hard for Buffalo to just cover this guy. I mean, it's not like the Bills have been getting torched by tight ends this year. No, they haven't. They've been allowing 4 catches to 56 yards and then they're giving out like 0.25 touchdowns per game. I'm off with Darius Green, man. I'd rather go Cameron Brate or, if you look even lower, I'd rather pay up for Antonio Gates, honestly, too. Like, I like Antonio Gates, don't hate him. But the two guys I'm looking at, 5.1K, CJ Fedorowicz and my man Jason Witten. Now, Jason Witten against the Giants has torched him in his entire career. Career numbers, 142 receptions, 1,400 yards, 13 touchdowns. In his game earlier this season, he saw 14 targets, 9 catches for 66 yards. Sure, the guy's not going to get you a lot of yards after catch, but I think he's as good as it gets for touchdown equity this week. He's just going to fall. He's going to catch that ball on the goal line and fall in. He's going to have probably 7 to 10 targets. He's probably going to catch 5 to 8 of those balls. He's going to get 60 yards. I think that's a great floor. His ceiling isn't high. I'm not going to play him in tournaments, but I think he's as good as it gets. And CJ Fedorowicz, he's been so solid the last couple of weeks. Pretty much the lowest target total he's seen in the last 7 or 8 weeks, 10 weeks, has been 5, and he's seen that twice. In one of those games, he caught a touchdown. He saw, 9, 6, 10, 5, 7, 7, 7, 8. He's very solid. And Brock Osweiler, as we say pretty much every time, this tight end isn't meant for this offense, but Brock Osweiler is just so bad, he just has to get it to him. I don't hate that play either. If you're going to be chasing Dwayne Allen points, go on ahead. I'm not doing it. If Jordan Reed is out, I might just plug in Vernon Davis. That's just going to happen again. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. Vance McDonald burned a lot of people last week, including myself. 4.7 against the Jets. I kind of like it. I mean, he's solid floor. He's probably going to get 6 to 9 targets. Maybe he finds the end zone. That'd be great. But, I'm not really big on paying up for tight ends unless it's, Eifert, Graham. I like Delaney Walker a little more than you do, especially in a tournament. I like a tournament stack with him and Murray. And then Brate, Fedorowicz, and Witten. Is there any other tight ends you want to discuss here? Do you have any other, calls that you want to, objections or anything?
No, I don't.
I got one more. Jermaine Gresham. I think Jermaine Gresham is okay at 4.5. They're starting to use him in the offense more, and as I mentioned, Carson Palmer is a shell of himself. And you look at the last 3 weeks, he's a value for you. I mean, if you really want to punt that tight end position, I don't hate Jermaine Gresham. Am I going to really go him in cash? Probably not, especially with Michael Floyd becoming a part of that offense again. But, like I said, Carson Palmer can't get the ball down the field, man. So, Jermaine Gresham, I guess, sort of makes sense if you want to go for, a punt play at tight end. But I'd rather just go like Jason Witten or Fedorowicz or, someone around there.
I think Zach Ertz, he's just been seeing 1 million targets a game.
Yep.
Since Jordan Matthews went down. Jordan Matthews practiced fully today on Thursday, but in the off chance that if he has any injury listing tomorrow, then I'm going to assume that he's not 100% going into Sunday, and then that's going to say Zach Ertz deserves some consideration. But Washington does have a hybrid linebacker, Sua Cravens, who was one of the top recruits coming out of high school going to USC. He was a safety. And then they converted him into linebacker when he went into the NFL. He's like one of those Shaq Thompson, Deion Buchanan types. Mm-hmm. So, and then Ertz isn't going to get you any yards after catch. So I just think it's a volume play if Jordan Matthews isn't 100% going into Sunday.
Yep, I hear that. Do you want to talk about defenses a little? I think it's pretty narrow what I'm going to be looking at. I have 3 plays that I'm interested in, and with 2 others that I kind of feel disgusting thinking about them. It's Minnesota, it's Denver, and my favorite play is the Lions. I would assume yours are very similar.
Yeah, Minnesota against Jacksonville. Pretty much any defense that could be playing in the snow gets a little bit of a boost from me. Correct. That's pretty much all I got there.
Yep. The 2 defenses that make me puke a little bit. Playing the Falcons defense. I think I heard someone say it, or I might have said it to myself. My buddy said it. He's like, I don't know why you don't just play the quarterbacks against Jared Goff until he proves that he's a good quarterback. So I see merit in maybe playing the Falcons, but priced up right next to the Vikings and, in between them and the Lions, I'd prefer to go elsewhere. And I guess the punt defense, I want to play is the Niners. It's not like they've done anything, but you got Bryce Petty coming to town. I think that's all I have to say. I mean, don't look at the game log. Just kind of like hold your nose and just like hope Petty throws for a couple, throws a couple interceptions. Literally, San Fran has been such a bad defense. They allow so many points, but we're talking about the Jets here with Bryce Petty at their quarterback. It's a disgusting pick, and the same thing goes with the Jaguars. They're going against crap teams. Really, Minnesota hasn't been playing well. Jets haven't been playing well. They're not good defenses. Do I like to play? No. Are they going to be in my cash game? No. But will I have a tournament lineup with them to free up some value? Probably. Maybe Petty throws an interception for a 6. I don't know.
I think those are the plays where, say you're like really in love with a guy. Like, say you have Zeke in your lineup right now, and you're just in love with Le'Veon Bell, and you need that 500. And in your dummy, like in the lineup construction that you have Minnesota in there. I think you're okay going. Like, you can justify it to yourself dropping down from Minnesota to San Francisco and then moving up onto Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, that's like
all
pretty much
preference, because like at the end of the day you have to analyze, like, is Le'Veon Bell going to outscore Ezekiel Elliott by more than the Vikings are going to outscore San Francisco? Like, you have to figure out which one of those matchups has the biggest difference between the two, and that's where you have to decide whether or not you're okay with punting your defense down to San Francisco, or if you want to just stick with Zeke's, like, safe floor, but maybe not getting the same reception upside that Le'Veon Bell has.
Right, yeah, and that's pretty much the predicament with defenses. Like, I'll sacrifice a defense to get to a better play as long as I know that play is guaranteed a higher floor than the guy that I'm already on. So it's something to take in consideration. Maybe not for cash games. I think I'm just going to stick the Lions in at 4.6. I think it's as safe as it gets. They've been so good the last couple of weeks, and there's that 4. I mean, our DraftKings are a little bit more expensive, so I hear the merit for going other plays, but I'm all aboard the Lions this week. I think the Bears' only option of offensive attack is to Jordan Howard, and the Lions have been one of the better run defenses in the NFL the last couple of weeks. And you think Matt Barkley is going to torch the Lions for like 3 touchdowns or 2 touchdowns? He's probably going to have 2 or 3 picks before he has 2 or 3 touchdowns. So yeah, that's my thought. Any final words to say to our listeners here regarding this week?
No, that's pretty much everything. Just hope that whoever you roster isn't on my lineup, because if anything goes as it has the past couple weeks, then you're screwed.
Yeah, I mean, last week was not good for me, but the other weeks have been very solid, and NBA has been cooking up too. I'm about to hop into we have about an hour before a lock, so I'm going to get some NBA research in. So thanks to all our listeners this week. Best of luck to you in your cash lineups. Hope you take down a GPP and have a successful week. Put some money in those pockets. Stuff those stockings for your family. And that's all from us here on Setting the Edge. Check out our website, settingtheedge.weebly.com. Check out our Twitter. It's settingtheedge_. Check out my Twitter. It's the Paisano, and then he is the Great Zambino, and both of these does have an A in it. Make sure you check out our bud Razzle11 Grinds as well. We love you, man. Enjoy those poker tournaments you're doing. But that's all from us here. Salut and best of luck.